Yo, book nerds. So I saw a post on Facebook that asked people, what is the worst ending to a book? And one of the comments said, Gone with the Wind. And their reasoning was because it was such a cliffhanger and they did not like that. And my response, like, oh my gosh, I needed to make a whole video about this because I think Gone with the Wind is a great story. Say what you will about the issues with slavery in the book. Like, yes, it's a product of its time, guys. Like, you can't read it for historical accuracy. But that's not the conversation I want to have today. The conversation I want to have today is about the end of the book. Now, it's been a while since I've read this. I read this actually in middle school. Guys, I love classics. What can I say? I read this in middle school. I've seen the movie a million times, but the end of the story has never bothered me, even though it's what some call a cliffhanger. What is a cliffhanger? A cliffhanger, if you don't know the term, is when a story's conflict does not get resolved. Like, the story does not wrap up perfectly. It just kind of cuts off and you're left to wonder what happened. And it's left up to the reader's interpretation. Now, cliffhangers, yes, they can be annoying. They can be annoying, but when done well, they can also be really great. But my issue with Gone with the Wind, with this comment about Gone with the Wind being terrible because it was a cliffhanger, I have a completely different view about that. So I will be spoiling things, just FYI. If you have not read the book or seen the movie, I have to spoil things because I'm talking about the ending. But you have Scarlet, right? You have Scarlet. She is a headstrong, just kind of a crappy person, but I still love her. Like, she is a selfish main character. She's way not perfect, right? She is not perfect, and yet, like, I root for her the whole way. And she was the belle of the ball, right? She came from a rich plantation family. Like, she was on top of the world at the beginning of the book, right? On top of the world. Like, she lived in her own little bubble. She had everything she wanted, except Ashley. If you know, you know. And then the Civil War happens, right? And she falls to the bottom, right? She's poor. She loses everything. Everything's taken away from her. She loses all her money. And she has to work in the fields herself to make enough money to just get by and to have food to eat, right? So she goes from being on top of the world to being poor, may lose her house because she can't pay her taxes. Like, she's at the bottom now, right? This is a tragedy. Story-wise, main character-wise, if you know, the term tragedy means your character starts at the top and ends at the bottom, right? So we had Scarlet on top and now she's at the bottom. But this story is huge. This story is huge. And Scarlet is the kind of character that she's a go-getter. She gets stuff done. She does not take no for an answer. Like, she works her ass off, for lack of a better term. And she gets back on top. She, through marrying people, right, and working hard and exploiting others, not saying this is a good thing that she's done all these things, but she becomes rich again. She becomes back on top. She has money again. She has all her needs taken care of, right? She does whatever she needs to get back on top of fate or fortune's wheel, whatever you want to term it. She started off on top. She became poor. Middle towards the end of the book, she ends up back on the top. And then her world comes crashing down again. She loses a child. She gets divorced. And that's where the book ends. She has lost everything. Not all her material possessions this time, but at the end of the book, she has lost a child and her husband. And she is emotionally at the bottom of the wheel again, the bottom of the circle, right? If you haven't watched my video about the Greek Wheel of Fortune, go check that out. But she ends the story where she is left like being very sad, very sad. She asks Rhett, you know, where will I go? What shall I do? And then Rhett has his famous line as he's leaving her, which is, my dear, I don't give a damn. In the movie, it's frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. But that's how her husband leaves her, right? And then she's heartbroken, she's sad, and her response to that is, I'll go home to Tara. I'll go back to my family plantation, right? I'm assuming you know this story if you're watching this video. She says she's going to go back to Tara, her family plantation, and she decides she can't think about all this right now, how upset she is, how heartbroken she is. She says, I'll think of all that tomorrow at Tara. I can stand it then. Tomorrow I'll think of some way to get him back. After all, tomorrow is another day. And that's how the story ends. And people say that's a cliffhanger because she's emotionally at the bottom of fate or fortune's wheel, right? I disagree. This is a tragedy. She has been on top of the world and at the bottom of the world. She's made it back on top of the world, and now she's back at the bottom. And I feel like it's not a cliffhanger because throughout this whole book, you know Scarlet is going to do whatever she has to do, hurt whoever she has to hurt, do whatever she has to do against social norms of the time to get what she wants. That's the kind of person she is. And if she wants Rhett, I know she's going to find some way to get Rhett. If she doesn't want Rhett, then she's going to find some other way to make herself happy because that's the kind of person Scarlett O'Hara is. And so, like, this is a, like, Greek tragedy, right? It's that same kind of formula where a character ends the story at the bottom. It doesn't mean the story has cut off. It doesn't mean the story is incomplete because we know what kind of person Scarlett is. Like, if you've read this book, if you've spent this much time with Scarlett, you know she is not going to stop. She's not going to give up because she never has. She has always done everything she needs to do to get whatever it is she wants. She is the most morally gray character person ever because she's not evil, but she will hurt people to get what she wants. She's not afraid to do that. And so, like, I don't know, that idea that this is a bad story because of the ending just bothers me because I think the ending is actually super smart, super brilliant on Margaret Mitchell's part. This story has other issues and I can totally see why you'd think it's bad for those other reasons that we're not going to get into today regarding like slavery and how that's represented. Totally valid. I get that. But when you talk about Scarlett O'Hara in the end of this book, you can't say it wasn't genius. I think it was genius on Margaret Mitchell's part because, again, she spent this entire huge chunker of a book showing us exactly who Scarlett is, and then she leaves it to you to trust that Scarlett is going to get out of this situation because she has gotten out of every other situation in her entire life. She has always gotten what she wants, and she busts her butt, and she screws people over, and she does whatever she needs to do to get what she wants. So I think the ending of this book is done beautifully and brilliantly. It doesn't give you all the answers, but you don't need it to. It would honestly be very redundant for it to give it to you. I feel like it would cheapen it so much if we saw what happened between her and Rhett later on. And I know there's a sequel that some other author has written. I actually have it, but I've never read it. And I don't know what happens. Don't tell me, please, because I have thought about reading it. But I think Margaret Mitchell's ending is perfect and needs no more. That's my thoughts. I feel like I just rambled on for so long. I feel like I'm due for a reread. I've watched the movie so many times, and I know the book has differences, but I might be due for a reread because, yeah, like I said, I read this in middle school, so maybe I will do a full-on reread and give you an actual like book review for the book, because right now the movie takes over my brain because I've seen that a million times and it's been so long since I've read the book. But I should think about doing that, doing a reread, and then maybe I will read the sequel and just see how I feel, because right now I feel like this needs no sequel. I love the way it ends and I think it's perfect. And then I could give you my thoughts on the actual sequel that the other author did, and we'll see how I feel about it. I have a feeling I'm not gonna like it, or maybe it'll be fine, but I won't need it. Like this, I just feel like does not need any more. I feel like it's ended perfectly. Those are my thoughts. I'm sorry for rambling so long. Drop down in the comments if you agree with me. Tell me why. If you disagree with me, argue with me. Let's debate this. But I want to just focus on the ending because I know there's a million other things we could talk about with this book. But like, let's talk about the ending. Is this the worst ending of a story ever, like that Facebook post says? I do not think so at all. I think the ending is great and I love it. Anyway, drop down in the comments. We can chat more there. I hope you have a lovely week. Hit like and subscribe. Thanks for talking books with me.